This time on Poll Hub, our America Now Index is out for July. What does it show, and what does it say about where we are as a nation in the midst of so much uncertainty? We are going to unpack the numbers and explain what they mean. And then, speaking of unpacking, teachers around the country are getting ready to unpack everything for the start of school. But what does the start of school look like? Different things in different places. And what do Americans think it should look like? We're going to take a look at that and look at what they're telling pollsters. So let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
We started a couple months ago a new thing called the America Now Index. And the goal of that, we've discussed it on the show, the goal of that was to capture in a number that people could understand, kind of a single number or a couple of different numbers, where we were as a country, what we were thinking about, what we're feeling, and be able to measure it over time, how that changed. There are other indexes. There's an economic index. There's all kinds of indexes that tell you. Consumer sentiment is one of the most popular ones, where people are in terms of how much they want to buy or not buy. So we started this thinking it would be a good idea to capture kind of the mood of the nation. And from the June to the July numbers, not a lot has changed on the overall number, but some numbers have changed behind the scenes. What do we see? What does this tell us? I know it's only been a couple of months we've been doing this, but what does it tell us about where we are right now?
Well, I would just jump in and say one of the things I'm seeing here is, 3 of the 4 subgroups that we have, the economy, community, healthcare, and society, 3 of those are in what we call our middle zone, our yellow area, our cautionary area. So if I wanted to look at one overall word that would describe where Americans are right now, it's kind of cautionary. It's an insecure time, and that's driven by the economy, by the coronavirus, by race relations. No shock there, but the fact that things are just not particularly steady, or they are steady. They're not positively steady.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense that we are in this yellow zone overall. People being very cautious, people being very uncertain. I think it is interesting that people do, though, feel very safe and like living in the communities where they are living. They feel a connection to them, particularly with regard to values. So that has been a segment of what we're measuring here that has really kept the index from being underwater. If we look at the other aspects, we look at society, which includes government. We look at the economy. Health overall is kind of mixed, because although people feel like their health right now is okay, we have seen over the last several months, as we've done this, that there's still a great deal of concern about the risk to people's health. Particularly regarding the pandemic. And I think is that as numbers have risen in other states around the country, I think that's what has kept that number at a low.
So here's the numbers. The economy's at a 5.0. Community, as you just talked about, people feeling
from
safe.
0 to 10.
Yeah,
Again, from 0 to 10. So it's right in the center.
And communities 7.3. Again, this is the people feeling safe at home, feeling good about their communities. That's the highest level. 6.8 for health. And Barb just talked about some of the issues with people not feeling a lot of risk to their health right now, but that's one to watch because of what's been going on. And society and government stands at 5.5. And I want to ask a question thinking ahead to November and what people are thinking about. And part of this is because we've been talking to voters in a lot of different ways lately. But if you look at what is driving this campaign, what you think is driving this campaign, it does appear to be the pandemic. Whether it's about the economy, it's still about the pandemic. Whether it's about health, it's about the pandemic. But Donald Trump's been running a campaign lately that's more about safety and security and defund the police and that kind of thing. What does it say when society and government is at 5.5 and the economy is at 5.0? those are the two things that seem to be kind of driving this, and they're both low. What does that say about what happens, in November in the arguments?
Well, it explains in other questions that we ask and others have asked, is the nation headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? And we're seeing enormous numbers for the wrong direction. So when you talk about a presidential campaign, which I'm glad you brought up, because I did notice there was a presidential campaign periodically, not much campaigning, but there is a campaign. And
we're about to go into convention season.
Yes,
virtual convention.
Virtual
the phrase is
or
unconventional conventions.
Unconventional season.
That's what we're talking about. That's stolen from me by me. I didn't come up with that myself. But anyway, the economy.
But you could have.
Corny enough. But the economy and health and race relations are the three things that are driving the numbers. It's interesting, as Jay, you pointed out, that the Trump campaign is really targeted to this law and order theme at the moment. And that's really what they're hoping to recapture, is some of the suburbs, because they're, in some ways coming up with a very old argument for, what sort of a 1950s argument that they hope will have some appeal in the suburbs, because that's the area they're getting clobbered in right now.
But that's the highest number we have in our index. At 7.3 is community. People feel good about the communities they live in. It just seems like it's not really following what we're seeing. It's not really telling us very much the way the campaigns are running about what we're seeing from talking to people.
Although there was a tiny... Go ahead,
I'd like you guys to weigh in too, because in any other time, and obviously this is an unprecedented time for many, many reasons, but in any other time, if you're looking at numbers like this, you would think that the party in power would be in very, very serious trouble. And I think a lot of the numbers do suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that there may be a disconnect between Trump and Congress? So some of the Senate races and the presidency itself. In other words, could Trump win and lose the Senate? Could Trump lose but the Democrats not take the Senate? Is there something that's tied there or not?
That's a great question. I think the former is more likely, that Trump could win and yet the Senate could go the other way. And just in the numbers, there's a lot of competitive Senate seats right now, and Trump and Biden may be a different matchup in some people's minds, depending on whether they can drive Biden's negatives up. Right now, that's not the case. But I think it's going to be very
different from 2016 when Trump was running against Hillary.
A very, very unpopular Hillary Clinton. But I think, and Jay, I'm sure you want to weigh in too on this, but I'm curious what everybody thinks the next 90 days are going to look like in terms of the index, and whether people are going to be more focused on some of these issues, or are we going to turn onto personalities and all the kinds of things that the Trump and Biden campaign may gravitate towards.
I mean, I think the personalities are baked in, right? We've been seeing that for years, is that everybody kind of knows everything about these two guys, that they're going to, they're locked in.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, I am interested in that the economy, as our score right now is at 5.0. The jobs market, the evictions, that could start, the unemployment benefits, just the extended ones, the increased ones, just ran out, and there doesn't look to be any deal in the Senate emerging. It's hard for me not to see this economy number starting to drift back down, and I can't think of a worse sign for an incumbent president than the index number on the economy going down.
Yeah,
I know it was a midterm election, but I do harken back to Ronald Reagan's midterm election.
1982.
Yeah, when the economy was really horrid. I mean, he came in with certainly a lackluster economy, which is why he defeated then President Carter, among all of the other foreign policy issues as well. But one of the things that strikes me in particular about that is because the economy was in such bad shape, their campaign was stay the course. And sometimes in a time of uncertainty, and when people are fearful, even though they want to change, they're afraid of change. How do you think that that's going to play in the next couple of
Well,
months?
I think it helped Joe Biden during the primaries because, people like Bernie Sanders, people were not in the mood in the middle of the pandemic for a revolution. And so, I think Joe Biden seemed to be kind of like the center, a rock of stability for that. And in some ways, I think he's going to try to play that card for the general too, that we just don't need this kind of everyday craziness that a lot of people are feeling.
That's an
That
interesting
being
take.
said,
Yeah.
that being said, our polls and every other poll has shown that the one area, pretty much the only area that Americans believe Donald Trump can do a better job than Joe Biden is on the economy. So that's certainly one to watch.
Yeah, and something that, as you say, we need to watch. But one of the other things we're going to be watching an awful lot on in the next couple of weeks is the concerns that people have about returning to school K through 12. This is things that AP and NORC have looked at. Gallup has looked at. Pew Research has looked at. Lots of numbers, because this is certainly an unusual summer coming off the closure of these schools, and now facing again, what is the policy? What should be done? Should we have full-time in-person school, part-time in-person with some distance learning, or full-time distance learning? And what's happened in these numbers, which I think is just astounding, because we always gravitate towards big change. But at the end of May, early June, 56% were telling us that they wanted full-time in-person. They weren't telling us, they were telling Gallup.
There were parents. Parents.
Yeah, parents.
Gallup was talking to parents.
Yeah, that they wanted full-time in-person school. 56%.
Well, we have a few colleagues who
Yes.
have young children, and they probably would have done almost anything to get them out of the house at that point.
Yeah, so that was the time where still they were doing lots of the equivalent of homeschooling. But that number 56 in the end of July numbers had fallen to 36. So a 20-point drop. Perhaps the idea of distance learning is just a little more distant to them. But I wanted to throw one thing at you guys, and I want to get your reaction. So a Pew Research came out today with some numbers. So what was really interesting to me is that, let's start with these Gallup numbers. 36% right now, down from 56, wanting full-time in person. 36%, same number, want part-time in-person school with some distance learning, pretty much unchanged. The group that's gone up 4 times was the full-time distance learning. So that's the huge difference, the trade-off from in-school to distance learning. Here's the rub here. When you look at Pew's numbers, a week after even that, more recently than Gallup did, the number for full-time remote is the same, 28. The number for part-time distance mixed in with some distance, part-time in school, some distance, 36, same number. But when you look at the full-time in-person school, that number went to 19%. So when you take the first numbers of Gallup, a while back it was 59, then it was 36.
56.
Yeah, I make up numbers for him. You have to watch me closely.
No, you're always within the error margin.
That's all you have to be. 56, 36, and now 19 in the Pew, even though their other numbers are the same. What they're showing is the rest are going to not sure. And so it looks like as we get closer and closer to school opening, the number of people who want full-time in person could be decreasing. That seems to be a kind of like a forward-looking number there. So that was something I thought.
Some of the issues I think that have changed as well is if we look back to the end of May, where you saw these very high numbers for full-time in-person schooling. It wasn't just the stress of the months prior.
Yeah.
I'm kind of working over my colleagues with young children, but it was also that many states had not seen significant spikes
Mhm.
in coronavirus, and that certainly changed from the end of May to the end of July very significantly. We saw very significant hotspots in Florida, Texas, California, many states around the country. Now concern being in the Midwest. So I think it really speaks to the fact that people don't feel that we necessarily have the pandemic under control, and the uncertainty as to how the pandemic and coronavirus specifically affects children. Because I think there's a lot of debate about
Sure.
whether children can how easily they can contract the virus, and also how much they can spread the virus. So it has become not just a school problem, and being able to get kids in a room and keep them socially distant, but what the implications are that for family units as a whole.
Yeah, and clearly,
That's one of the things.
yeah, I was just going to say,
Go
Jay,
ahead.
clearly, if you're worried that your child may get the coronavirus, you're less likely to want that child to be full-time in-person school. So clearly, you want the kid not in school if you're worried. If you're not worried, it's okay to send them to school.
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that, as you said, Barb, there's a huge amount of uncertainty, and in uncertainty, I think you get a lot more of this unsure kind of response. Like, well, I don't know, maybe a hybrid. We have for a school district here in New York State, we did a poll, and we talked to the parents in that district to get a sense from them what they were talking about. This was for the district. I think what we're seeing, though, is that in this uncertainty, it's playing out not just for parents, but for teachers and for governors and for leaders of cities, for mayors. And there's no national leadership. There's nobody at the national level saying, here's what we should do, here's how should do it. There's no money that has so far been allocated to get school districts money to be able to do any of the things that some people are recommending. Every school district, every mayor, every governor is talking to different health experts. And I think that's the core of this. That's the root of this for parents, is that there's nobody that they can turn to and go, okay, what is the answer?
Sure.
What do we need to do? We'll do it. But what is the answer?
And then
there's no
yeah, and those AP NORC poll numbers that we alluded to earlier, 36% approve of Donald Trump's handling of education issues, 63% disapprove. So that's part of the leadership. These numbers are sort of like handling the coronavirus numbers for him.
Well, also, we've seen in other polls that we've done this lack of trust in the information itself, and people are having a difficult time figuring out where to go for information, because very often when they're looking at our political leadership, and I think this is on both sides of the aisle, they do feel that what they're saying is politically motivated. Whether it is or it isn't, there's this sense that they're not getting objective information, but instead they're getting information that benefits that side. And we certainly see, we've said this over and over again, and how can a pandemic actually be politicized? But we also see it on the issue of going back to school. And I want to qualify that these polls have been of parents. So although Republicans in general tend to be older than Democrats and independents, we are speaking about parents who are Republicans and comparing parents across party, and find the same thing on this issue about attending school, where parents who are Republicans believe that the students and their children should be in school, and independents and Democrats more likely to want to have some kind of a hybrid model or have some kind of a distance learning model. I don't know what this means, though, also going forward. If you look at this generation of children, they've had to deal with an awful lot. And I think one of the things that's very striking to me in a number of the surveys that we've seen done and we've done as well is this whole issue of the mental health of children and how well they're really adapting to this uncertainty in how they're learning and how they're able to interact with their peers. Thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, I think it's kids. It's a lot of folks. I mean, that's sort of, we never really look at our society. We look at reopening the economy. We look at jobs. Look at healthcare. The mental health issue is a big deal, and for these kids, this is, these are young children in a lot of instances, and it's kind of like it's been going on a long time.
But this is also the school shooting generation. I mean, now it's, now they're going from, that worry and that concern to, the pandemic generation. And the fact that it doesn't get acknowledged, I think, is also somewhat of a concern. And certainly, Jay, you mentioned teachers. They have their hands full.
Yeah, I think what we're going to be seeing over the next few months is, as this plays out, is uncertainty turning into certainty, but a very different certainty depending on where you live and what resources you have. And I think what we don't talk about and what we will be talking about for a really long time to come is rebuilding schools, rebuilding healthcare, rebuilding everything.
Did you mention infrastructure?
I don't know how much damage we recognize has already.
And that has been decades of neglect.
Well, this may not surprise anybody. I was just going to, boy, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Go for it. Go for it.
I'm not surprised, Jay, Mary, Amelia, Casey, or Barb, that does it for this edition of Poll Hub. And Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll. I always like to do this part at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, where we'll be opening very shortly. And we're hoping that this will be a success here at the college. And Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our editor, and Amelia Morell and Hudson, her loyal assistant, are our production assistants.
And thanks to the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University for providing us with the ability to look back at survey questions and results over the decades.
And if you've got questions, let us hear from you. We're on social media at Marist Poll. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, we talked about the Academy. That's our free online learning academy. Check that out. It is, as I mentioned earlier, free, which is always a good thing. You can learn more about polling. If you like what you hear, leave a review. It's the best way to help other people find Poll Hub and help them, tune in and find out more about polling. And finally, a special thanks. Last week, our executive producer, Mary Griffith, had a little time off, just a day or two, a whole week. And Amelia Morell, who is a college student, filled in and did the whole kit and caboodle, produced the whole show. So big kudos to Amelia for that. Appreciate
Every week it's Amelia this, Amelia that. I mean, Hudson, her father.
Well, no, with you it's Hudson this.
Watch out, Mary. Watch out, Mary.
Yeah.
Anyway, big thanks to Amelia, and everybody be safe. Early August here. We've got a ways to go. So let's stick together and stick it out. Be safe. We'll see you back here next week.